What if the loneliest man in the world discovered that true wealth had nothing to do with money and everything to do with a simple birthday card left by someone he barely noticed? Julian Blackwood, the billionaire CEO who had everything except the one thing money could not buy, was about to have his entire world turned upside down by a young woman who cleaned his mansion and cared for his home while silently fighting battles he could never imagine. This is a story about a man who thought he had reached the top only to realize he had been living at the bottom all along, about a birthday that started in complete silence and ended with a discovery that would change two lives forever, about sacrifice, love, and the moment when a heart made of stone finally learned to feel "stay with me." Because what happens next will make you question everything you thought you knew about success, happiness, and what it truly means to be rich. Julian Blackwood woke up on the morning of his 42nd birthday to absolute silence, and that silence was something he had grown accustomed to over the years. But on this particular morning it felt heavier than usual. It pressed down on his chest like an invisible weight, reminding him of everything his life had become and everything it was not. He opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling of his massive bedroom, a ceiling so high it could have belonged to a cathedral. The room was decorated in shades of gray and silver, cold colors that matched the temperature of his existence perfectly. Everything in his penthouse was expensive. Everything was perfectly arranged, and everything was utterly lifeless. He sat up slowly and swung his legs over the side of the bed, his feet touching the cold marble floor. He did not need to look at the clock to know it was exactly 6 in the morning, because Julian Blackwood was a man of precision and routine. Every single day of his life followed the same pattern. Wake up at 6, work out for an hour, shower, dress in one of his perfectly tailored suits, and head to the office by 8:30. He had not deviated from this schedule in over 15 years. Not for holidays, not for weekends, and certainly not for birthdays. Birthdays were just another day to Julian, or at least that is what he told himself. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city below from up here on the 45th floor. The people looked like ants scurrying around with their small problems and their small lives. Julian had built his empire from nothing, and now he stood literally above everyone else. Blackwood Enterprises was one of the most successful investment firms in the country, and Julian was its ruthless leader. People feared him, respected him, and kept their distance from him, which was exactly how he liked it. Or so he thought. He turned away from the window and headed to his private gym. The workout was mechanical and emotionless, just like everything else he did. 40 minutes on the treadmill, 20 minutes of weight training. His body was as disciplined as his mind. He did not allow himself any weakness, any softness. The shower that followed was quick and efficient, and when he stepped out, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. 42 years old today, he thought. But the man staring back at him looked older. His face was handsome in a cold sort of way, sharp jawline, steel gray eyes, dark hair with just a touch of silver at the temples. But there was something missing in those eyes, something that used to be there a long time ago, before the money, before the success, before he had built walls so high around himself that no one could climb over them. He dressed in silence, choosing a charcoal gray suit with a crisp white shirt and a black tie. His reflection in the mirror looked exactly like what he was, a man who had everything and felt nothing. He walked out of his bedroom and into the vast living area of his penthouse. The space was enormous, with high ceilings, modern art on the walls, and furniture that cost more than most people made in a year. But it felt empty, like a museum. After closing time, he had lived here for 5 years, and it had never felt like home. It was just a place where he slept, a place that showcased his wealth but held no memories, no laughter, no warmth. He made his way to the kitchen, expecting to find it empty as usual. But something caught his eye, a small envelope sitting on the pristine marble counter. It looked out of place in this world of steel and glass, a simple white envelope with his name written on it. In careful handwriting, Julian stopped and stared at it for a moment. Confused, he could not remember the last time he had received a birthday card. Actually, he could not remember the last time he had received any kind of personal mail that was not a business document or an invitation to some charity event he only attended for appearances. He picked up the envelope slowly, as if it might disappear. If he moved too quickly, his name on the front, Mr. Blackwood, written in blue ink. The handwriting was neat but unpracticed, like someone who had taken great care to make it look nice. He turned it over and carefully opened it. Inside was a simple card with a picture of a sunrise on the front. He opened it and read the words inside. "Wishing you a very happy birthday. Mr. Blackwood, I hope this year brings you joy and peace. You deserve happiness. Callie." Julian read the words 3 times, his eyes moving over each letter as if trying to decode a hidden message. Callie, his nanny, or rather his housekeeper. He was not entirely sure what her official title was, because he had never really paid attention. She was the young woman who came to his penthouse 5 days a week to clean and organize and make sure everything was in order. She was quiet, almost invisible, moving through his space like a ghost. He realized with a strange sense of shame that he barely knew anything about her. He knew her first name only because it was on the paperwork his assistant had handled when she was hired. 6 months ago, he had probably spoken directly to her less than a dozen times, and most of those conversations had been brief instructions about things he needed done. He stood there in his empty kitchen holding this simple card and felt something crack inside his chest. It was a small crack, barely noticeable. But it was there this young woman who he paid but barely acknowledged had taken the time to buy him a card, to write him a message to wish him happiness, and he could not remember the last time anyone had done something like that for him. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the moment he pulled it out and saw a text from his assistant reminding him of his 8:30 meeting. He put the card down on the counter and stared at it for another moment before forcing himself to walk away. He had a company to run after. He could not stand around getting emotional over a birthday card. But as he rode the elevator down to the parking garage where his driver was waiting, he could not stop thinking about it. And for the first time in years, Julian Blackwood felt something other than emptiness. He felt curiosity. The day at the office was exactly like every other day: meetings, conference calls, decisions that affected millions of dollars. People brought him reports and he approved or rejected them with quick efficiency. His assistant brought him lunch at his desk, and he ate while reviewing contracts. He was a machine, and machines did not have feelings. Machines did not need birthday celebrations. But throughout the day, his mind kept drifting back to that card sitting on his kitchen counter. Back to the careful handwriting, back to those words, "You deserve happiness." Did he deserve happiness? He was not sure he had ever really thought about it. Happiness seemed like something other people pursued, something soft and unreliable he had pursued, success, power, control. And he had achieved all of it. But standing at the top was a lonely place, lonelier than he had ever imagined it would be when he finally returned home that evening. It was nearly 9 o'clock. The penthouse was dark and silent, just as he had left it. Callie would have been gone for hours. Her workday ended at 5. He turned on the lights and the space came to life in that artificial way it always did, beautiful and cold. He loosened his tie and walked back to the kitchen. The card was still there, right where he had left it. He picked it up again and read it once more, this time slower, really absorbing the words. "I hope this year brings you joy and peace." Such simple words, but they struck him deeply, because no one ever wished those things for him. People wished him success or congratulated him on deals or told him how impressive his company was. But joy and peace, those were things that seemed to exist in a different world, a world he had left behind a long time ago. He pulled out his phone and opened his assistant's contact, but then he stopped. What was he going to ask her for information about his housekeeper? It seemed strange, invasive even. But the curiosity was eating at him. He wanted to know more about this young woman who had shown him a kindness he did not deserve. He put his phone down and made a decision. Tomorrow, he would talk to her. Actually, talk to her. Not just give her instructions, but have a real conversation. It was a small thing, but for Julian it felt like a huge step. The next morning, Julian deliberately stayed home a little longer than usual. He told his assistant he would be coming in late, which was something he never did. His assistant sounded shocked on the phone and asked if everything was okay. He assured her it was, and then he waited. Callie arrived at exactly 8:00, just like she always did. He heard the key turn in the lock, and then the soft sound of the door opening and closing. She moved quietly through the space, and he found himself feeling nervous, which was ridiculous. He was a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals, who faced down corporate sharks without blinking, but the idea of having a personal conversation with someone made his palms sweat. He walked out of his office and found her in the living room. She was wearing simple clothes, jeans, and a plain sweater. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she was already starting to dust the shelves. She looked up when she heard him, and her eyes went wide with surprise. "Mr. Blackwood," she said quickly, standing up straighter. "I am sorry I did not know you were still home. Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," he said, and then he realized he was just standing there staring at her. Like an idiot. He cleared his throat. "I wanted to thank you for the card." She blinked, looking confused for a moment, and then understanding dawned on her face. "Oh," she said, and a slight blush crept into her cheeks. "It was nothing, really. I just thought everyone should get a birthday card on their birthday." It was not nothing, Julian said, and he was surprised by the intensity in his own voice. "It meant a lot to me." They stood there in awkward silence for a moment, and Julian realized he had no idea how to do this, how to have a normal human conversation about normal human things. He had spent so long being the boss, being in control, that he had forgotten how to just be a person. So he decided to just be direct. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course," she replied, still looking a bit uncertain. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Why did you get me a card? You barely know me." She looked down at her hands and then back up at him because she said softly, "Everyone deserves to be remembered on their birthday. Everyone deserves to know that someone cares. Even if it is just a little bit." Those words hit him harder than any business setback ever had. Even if it is just a little bit. She saw him as someone who needed even that small amount of caring. And she was right. He did need it. He just had not realized how much. "Do you have time to sit down for a minute?" he asked, gesturing toward the couch. "I would like to talk to you if that is okay." She looked surprised again, but nodded. "Okay." Sure. They sat down on opposite ends of his expensive couch, and Julian felt more out of place in his own home than he ever had. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "I realize I do not know anything about you. And I should." Callie looked down at her hands again, and he noticed they were rough and reddened from work. She was young, he realized, probably in her early 20s, and there was a tiredness in her eyes that someone her age should not have. "Well," she started slowly, "there is not much to tell. I have been working as a housekeeper for about 3 years now. I work for several clients. You are one of them. Do you have family?" he asked. She hesitated, and he saw something flicker across her face. Pain, maybe, or worry. "I have a younger brother," she said finally. "His name is Micah. He is 13, just the two of you?" Julian asked gently. She nodded. "Yes, our parents died 4 years ago in a car accident. It was just the two of us after that." "I am sorry," Julian said. "And he meant it. That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was 19, Micah was 9. I had just started college, but I had to drop out to take care of him and to work. We had some life insurance money from our parents, but it was not enough. I needed to work full-time to support us, so college had to wait." "You dropped out of college to take care of your brother." Julian said something about that struck him deeply. "Yes," she said, "I was studying to be a teacher. I loved it. But Micah needed me, and he needed stability. He needed a home and food and someone to be there for him. So I did what I had to do." "What are you planning to do?" he asked. "Are you going to go back to school?" Eventually she smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I hope. So," she said, "someday when Micah is older, when he does not need me as much anymore. I have been saving a little bit every month, but it is slow right now. My focus is just making sure he is okay, making sure he has what he needs." Julian felt something shift inside him. This young woman had sacrificed everything for her brother. She had given up her dreams, her education, her future to take care of someone she loved. And here he was with more money than he could ever spend living in a penthouse that cost more per month than most people made in a year. And he had never thought about anyone but himself. "He is lucky to have you," Julian said. "Your brother. I mean, to have someone who cares that much." She looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw her really smile, a genuine warm smile that transformed her entire face. "He is the best thing in my life," she said. "Everything I do is for him." They talked for another 30 minutes, and Julian learned more about Callie in that short time than he had learned about anyone in years. She told him about Micah, about his love of science and how smart he was. She told him about the small apartment they lived in, and how she tried to make it feel like home. She told him about her dreams of one day finishing her degree and becoming a teacher. And as she talked, Julian felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt moved. He felt connected to another human being, and he felt ashamed of how much he had and how little he had done with it, ashamed of how he had lived in his bubble of wealth and success without ever looking at the people around him, really looking at them. When Callie finally said she should get back to work, Julian thanked her again for the card and for talking with him. She smiled at him, that warm, genuine smile, and went back to her cleaning. And Julian went to his office, but he could not focus on work. All he could think about was Callie and her brother Micah, who was 13 and loved science, who had lost his parents and had a sister who sacrificed everything for him that evening. After Callie had left, Julian did something he had never done before. He asked his assistant to look into something personal. He wanted to know everything about Callie Stevens, her background, her situation, and most importantly, what she needed. His assistant was clearly surprised by the request, but she was too professional to ask questions. She simply said she would get him the information within 24 hours. True to her word, by the next afternoon, Julian had a complete file on his desk about Callie Stevens, and what he read made his chest ache. Callie had not just dropped out of college. She had been doing exceptionally well. She had been on a scholarship studying education with a focus on elementary teaching. Her professors had written glowing recommendations, and she had been on track to graduate with honors. But then her parents died and everything changed. She withdrew from school, took on multiple jobs, and became the sole guardian of her younger brother, Micah. The file also included information about Micah. He was currently enrolled in a private school, one that focused on science and technology. And by all accounts, he was thriving there. He was at the top of his class, and his teachers said he had incredible potential. But there was a problem. The school was expensive, very expensive, and according to the financial information in the file, Callie was struggling to keep up with the tuition payments. She had missed the last 2 payments, and the school had sent a notice that if she did not pay soon, Micah would have to withdraw. Julian sat back in his chair and stared at the file for a long time. He thought about Callie working multiple jobs, cleaning his penthouse and the homes of other wealthy people who probably never even looked at her twice. He thought about her saving every penny she could, trying to give her brother the education and opportunities he deserved. And he thought about himself sitting in his office making decisions about millions of dollars, without a second thought, living in luxury that he did not even enjoy. And for what? What was the point of all his success, all his wealth, if it did not mean anything, if it did not make him happy, if it did not help anyone? He made a decision right then and there, a decision that felt more important than any business deal he had ever made. He picked up the phone and called his assistant. "I need you to do something for me," he said, "and I need it done quietly, anonymously." "What do you need?" she asked. "I need you to contact Micah Stevens' school." Julian said, "I want his tuition paid in full. Not just the missed payments, but for the rest of this year. And for the next 5 years until he graduates, I want it set up as an anonymous scholarship in memory of his parents. Make sure they know the funds are secure, and that Micah can continue his education without any financial concerns." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then his assistant said, "Of course, Mr. Blackwood. I will handle it right away. And one more thing," Julian added. "Yes."
See if you can find out what it would take for Callie Stevens to go back to school. I want to know what her tuition would be, and if there are any programs that could help her. I want information on everything." His assistant confirmed she would look into it, and when Julian hung up the phone, he felt something he had not felt in years. He felt good. He felt like maybe for the first time in a long time he was doing something that actually mattered over the next few days. Julian found himself paying more attention to Callie when she came to clean his penthouse. He would come out of his office and talk to her, asking her about her day, about Micah, about anything really. At first she seemed surprised by the attention, but gradually she relaxed, and their conversations became easier, more natural. She told him about Micah's science project, about how excited he was about his classes, and Julian listened, really listened. And every time she talked about her brother, he could hear the love and pride in her voice. Then one afternoon, about a week after their first real conversation, Callie came to work and Julian could immediately tell something was wrong. She looked upset. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying, and her hands were shaking. As she set down her cleaning supplies, "Callie," he said, walking over to her, "what is wrong? Is everything okay?" She looked up at him and tears filled her eyes. "I am sorry," she said. "I should not bring my problems here. I got some news today and I do not know what to do." Julian felt his heart clench. What happened? He asked gently. "Micah's school," she said, wiping at her eyes. "They sent me a letter. I am behind on his tuition, and they said, if I do not pay by the end of the month, he will have to leave. I have been trying so hard to catch up, but I do not have enough. I do not know how I am going to tell him. He loves that school so much, and he is doing so well there, and I am going to have to take him out because I cannot afford." Julian felt a wave of confusion because he had already arranged for the payment. It should have been taken care of days ago. But clearly something had gone wrong. Or maybe the school had not processed it yet or sent the letter before they received the payment. "Sit down," he said, guiding her to the couch. "Please just sit down for a minute." She sat and he sat beside her. "Callie," he said carefully, "I need to tell you something and I need you to listen." "Okay?" She looked at him with those tear-filled eyes and nodded. "I already took care of it." He said, "The tuition, it has been paid." Her eyes went wide. What do you mean?" "I set up an anonymous scholarship for Micah." He said, the words coming out in a rush. "I had my assistant contact the school days. Go all of his tuition for the rest of this year and for the next 5 years until he graduates. It has all been paid for. You did not need to worry." She stared at him, her mouth opening and closing, but no words coming out. "You." She finally whispered. "You paid for his school, but why? I read about your situation," Julian said, "and I learned about how much you have sacrificed for your brother. And I wanted to help. Micah deserves to stay in that school, and you deserve not to have to worry about." Callie put her hands over her face and began to cry, really cry, deep sobs that shook her whole body. And Julian sat there not knowing what to do. Should he comfort her? Should he give her space? He had no experience with this. Finally, he just gently put a hand on her shoulder. "I am sorry," he said. "Did I overstep? I just wanted to help." "No," she said, looking up at him with tears streaming down her face. "No, you do not understand. This is the most incredible thing anyone has ever done for us. I have been so scared, so worried about what would happen to Micah if he had to leave that school, and you took care of it like it was nothing. It is not nothing." Julian said, "It matters. It matters a lot. And you matter, Callie. You and your brother, you both matter." They sat there for a long time, and Julian realized that this moment, this connection with another person, was worth more than every dollar in his bank account. For the first time in years, he felt like his money had actually done something meaningful. Over the next few weeks, Julian and Callie grew closer. Not in a romantic way necessarily, but in a way that felt important. They talked every time she came to work, and Julian found himself looking forward to those conversations. More than any business meeting, he learned about her dreams, about how she still hoped to become a teacher someday. And he learned about Micah and his obsession with astronomy and space exploration. And Callie learned about Julian too. She learned about his childhood, about how he had grown up poor and had fought his way to the top. She learned about how his drive for success had cost him everything: his relationships, his happiness, his sense of self. She learned that beneath the cold exterior was a man who was deeply lonely and searching for meaning. One evening, About 3 weeks after he had paid for Micah's tuition, Julian asked Callie if she would stay after work for a bit, because he wanted to talk to her about something important. She agreed, looking curious and a bit nervous. They sat in his living room and Julian handed her an envelope. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." He said. She opened the envelope and pulled out the papers inside her eyes, scanned the documents, and then went wide. This is an acceptance letter to the university," she said, looking up at him in shock. "And a scholarship, I called them," Julian explained. "I told them about your situation, and I made some arrangements. You have been accepted back into the teaching program, and your tuition is fully covered, all of it, until you graduate. You can go back to school, Callie. But I have to work," she said. "I have to take care of Micah. I cannot." "I have thought about that too," Julian said. "I want to offer you a different position instead of working as a housekeeper. I want you to work for me as a part-time personal assistant. The hours are flexible. You can make your own schedule around your classes. And Micah's school. The pay is significantly more than what you are making now, enough to support both of you comfortably." She stared at him, tears filling her eyes again. "Why are you doing all of this for me?" she whispered. "Because," Julian said, meeting her eyes, "because you reminded me that there is more to life than success and money. You reminded me what it means to care about someone other than yourself. You gave me a birthday card, and you changed my life. Callie, I want to help you achieve your dreams the way you helped me remember mine." "Wait," she said. "What dreams are you talking about? You are already successful. You have everything." Julian shook his head. "No," he said. "I have money. I have a company, but I do not have what you have. I do not have purpose. I do not have someone I am fighting, for I have been empty for so long, and you showed me that life can be different, that it should be different. I want to do more with what I have. I want it to matter, and helping Micah. It matters." Callie reached out and took his hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for seeing us, for caring. I will never be able to repay you." "You do not need to repay me," Julian said. "Just promise me you will finish your degree and become the teacher you were meant to be." "I promise," she said, smiling. Through her tears, "I promised that night after Callie left." Julian stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city below. But this time the view looked different. The people down there were not ants with small lives. They were people, with stories, with struggles, with dreams, just like Callie, just like Micah, just like him. And for the first time in years, Julian Blackwood felt rich. Not in money, but in something far more valuable. He felt connected. He felt purpose. And he felt hope. The weeks turned into months, and true to her word, Callie enrolled back in the university. She cut back her cleaning jobs and started working for Julian as his part-time assistant. She was good at it too, organized, efficient, and she brought a warmth to his office that had never been there before. Micah continued to thrive at his school, and Julian even met him once when Callie brought him by the office. The kid was smart as a whip, and his enthusiasm for science was infectious. Julian found himself setting up a college fund for Micah too, planning for a future that he now felt invested in. But more than that, Julian started to change. In other ways, he began to look at his company differently. He started a scholarship program for underprivileged students. He set up a foundation to help single parents who were struggling to make ends meet. He used his wealth not just to accumulate more wealth, but to actually make a difference in people's lives. And through it all, Callie was there, not as his employee but as his friend, and maybe over time as something more. But that was a story that was still being written. What mattered was that Julian Blackwood had learned the most important lesson of his life, that true wealth is not measured in dollars or properties or power. It is measured in the lives you touch, the people you help, and the love you share. And it all started with a simple birthday card left by a young woman who saw a lonely man and decided he deserved to be remembered. Months had passed since that birthday, and Julian found himself thinking about how different his life had become. He still ran his company, still made important decisions, still lived in his penthouse, but everything felt different, because now it all had meaning. One afternoon, Callie walked into his office with a bright smile. She had just finished her first semester back at university, and her grades were perfect, Julian, she said, sitting down across from his desk. I have something to tell you. What is it? He asked, looking up. From his computer, I got offered a student teaching position at an elementary school, she said, and her eyes were shining with excitement. I am going to be in a real classroom working with real kids. It is everything I have ever wanted. Julian felt a swell of pride. That is incredible. He said, I am so proud of you. You have worked so hard for this. Thank you, she said. And then her expression turned more serious. Thank you for everything, Julian, for believing in me, for helping me, for giving me this chance. You changed my life. We changed each other, Julian said, and he meant it. You reminded me what it means to be human, to care about someone other than myself. I should be thanking you. They sat there for a moment, just looking at each other, and Julian realized that somewhere along the way his feelings for Callie had grown into something deeper than friendship. But he also knew that she was focused on her education, on building a life for herself and her brother. And he respected that. Whatever happened between them would happen in its own time. There was no rush for now. It was enough to know that he was not alone anymore, that he had people in his life who mattered that evening. Julian did something he had not done in years. He left work early. He went home to his penthouse, and instead of working through dinner, he ordered food and invited Callie and Micah to join him. They came over, and the three of them sat in his living room eating pizza and talking about everything and nothing. Micah told them all about his latest science project, and Callie talked about her classes. And Julian just listened, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the food at one point. Micah looked up at Julian and said, No, Mr. Blackwood, you are not like other rich people. What do you mean? Julian asked, amused. Most rich people do not care about people like us, Micah said with the blunt honesty of a 13-year-old. But you do. You actually care? Julian felt his throat tighten. I do care. He said, I care a lot about both of you after dinner. Micah fell asleep on the couch, and Callie covered him with a blanket. She and Julian stood by the windows looking out at the city lights. Thank you for tonight, she said softly. This means a lot to him, to both of us. Thank you for being here. Julian said, for letting me be part of your lives. Callie turned to look at him. You know, when I left that birthday card for you, she said, I never imagined it would lead to all of this. I just thought you seemed lonely, and everyone deserves to feel special on their birthday. I was lonely, Julian admitted, more lonely than I had ever admitted to myself. But you changed that. You saw me, really saw me, and you cared. And that made all the difference. They stood there in comfortable silence, and Julian felt a sense of peace that he had never known. This was what life was supposed to be about. Not the money, not the success, but this connection. Understanding, caring for other people. As the night wore on and Callie gently woke Micah to take him home, Julian walked them to the door. Good night, he said, and thank you again for everything. Good night, Julian, Callie said, and then she did something unexpected. She reached up and kissed him on the cheek. We will see you tomorrow, she said, smiling. Julian stood at the door long after they had left, his hand touching the spot where she had kissed him, and he found himself smiling, a real, genuine smile. The next morning, Julian woke up early as always, but this time the silence of his penthouse did not feel oppressive. It felt peaceful. He made himself coffee and stood by the windows watching the sunrise, and he thought about how much his life had changed in just a few months. He thought about Callie pursuing her dreams of becoming a teacher. He thought about Micah thriving in school and dreaming of becoming a scientist. And he thought about himself and how he had gone from being a lonely man surrounded by wealth to being someone who actually mattered to other people, someone who made a difference. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant reminding him of his morning meetings. But for once, Julian was not in a rush. He finished his coffee, savoring the moment, and then he got ready for work. But this time it felt different because he was not just going to the office to make money. He was going because he had a purpose. He had people counting on him, people he cared about, and that made all the difference. When he arrived at the office, Callie was already there, organizing his schedule for the day. She looked up when he walked in and smiled. Good morning, Mr. Blackwood, she said cheerfully. Good morning, he replied, and please call me Julian. We have been through too much for formalities, okay? She said, still smiling. Julian, it is. They worked together throughout the morning, and Julian found himself constantly distracted by her presence. The way she hummed softly while she worked, the way she always had a kind word for everyone, the way she made his cold office feel just a little bit warmer. At lunchtime, she brought him a sandwich and sat down across from his desk. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course," Julian replied. "What made you decide to help us?" he asked. "I mean, really, why did you do all of this?" Julian put down his sandwich and thought about the question for a moment, because he said slowly, "For the first time in my life, I felt like I could do something that actually mattered. I spent years building wealth, accumulating success, and none of it made me happy. But helping you, helping Micah, that made me feel something. It gave me purpose." She nodded. "I understand." She said, "You know, my brother talks about you all the time. He thinks you are like a superhero." Julian laughed. "I am definitely not a superhero." "Yes, you are," she said to us. "You are. You gave us hope when we had none. You gave us a future we thought was impossible. That is pretty heroic if you ask me." "I just did what anyone with the resources should do," Julian said. "I still do not think I deserve all this credit you do, though," Callie insisted, "because most people in your position would not have done anything. They would have just gone on with their lives. But you saw us, you really saw us, and you cared enough to help. That is rare, Julian, that is special." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Callie said, "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" Julian asked. "When I finish my degree." She said, "I want to start a program to help other single parents who are trying to go back to school. I want to use what I have learned from my own experience to help others who are struggling the same way I was." Julian felt a surge of emotion. "That is an incredible idea," he said, "and I want to help however I can. We could set up a foundation together. Make it something real. Something that helps a lot of people, really." She asked, her eyes lighting up. "You would do that?" "Absolutely," Julian said. "In fact, I have been thinking about expanding my charitable work. And this would be perfect. We could create scholarships, provide childcare assistance, maybe even help with housing, whatever single parents need to succeed." Callie reached across the desk and squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for believing in my dream and for wanting to make it bigger." Over the next several months, Julian and Callie worked together not just on his business matters, but on building the foundation. They called it the Second Chance Foundation, and its mission was to help single parents pursue education and career opportunities. They set up scholarships, arranged for child care services, and even created a mentorship program where successful professionals could guide and support single parents who were working toward their goals. The foundation launched on Julian's 43rd birthday, exactly 1 year after Callie had left him that simple birthday card. And this time, his birthday was anything but silent. There was a launch event with dozens of people in attendance, single parents who would be helped by the foundation, community leaders, reporters, and of course Callie and Micah. Julian stood at the podium looking out at the crowd, and he felt genuine happiness. "A year ago," he began, "I woke up on my birthday to complete silence. I had everything money could buy, but I had nothing that truly mattered. Then someone showed me kindness. Someone reminded me what it means to care about other people, and that changed everything. This foundation exists because of Callie Stevens, a young woman who sacrificed her own dreams to take care of her brother, who worked tirelessly to give him a better life, and who, despite her own struggles, took the time to make a lonely man feel like he mattered. Thank you, Callie, for that birthday card. Thank you for seeing me, and thank you for changing my life." The crowd applauded, and Julian saw Callie wiping tears from her eyes. Micah was standing next to her, beaming with pride after the event as people were mingling and celebrating. Callie pulled Julian aside. "I have something for you," she said, handing him an envelope. "Another birthday card?" he asked. Smiling, "Open it." She said. He opened the envelope, and inside was a card, but this one was different. On the front was a picture that Micah had drawn of the three of them standing together under a sky full of stars. Inside, Callie had written, "Thank you for being the family we never knew we needed. Happy birthday, Julian. With love, Callie and Micah." Julian felt tears prick at his eyes, and he looked up at Callie. "You have no idea how much this means to me," he said. "I think I do," she replied, and then she stepped closer and took his hand. "I need to tell Something she said over this past year, you have become so important to me and to Micah. You have been a friend, a mentor, a supporter, but I think somewhere along the way, you became something more. And I needed you to know that Julian felt his heart racing. Are you saying what I think you are saying? He asked. I am saying. She replied that I care about you, Julian. Not just because of everything you have done for us, but because of who you are, because you
make me laugh, because you listen, because you have shown me what it means to be truly kind and generous. I am saying that I think I am falling in love with you. Julian pulled her close and wrapped his arms around her. I have been in love with you. For months he whispered into her hair. I just did not know how to tell you, now you know, she said, smiling up at him. They stood there holding each other as the party continued around them, and Julian realized that this moment was the culmination of everything that had happened over the past year. He had started out as a lonely man with everything and nothing, and now he had what truly mattered. He had love, he had purpose, he had family. The following weeks were a blur of happiness, Julian, and Callie officially began dating, and Micah gave his enthusiastic approval. The three of them spent more and more time together, going to museums, taking trips, and just enjoying each other's company. Julian found himself laughing more than he had in years, and his employees noticed the change. He was still a brilliant businessman, but now he was also approachable, kind, and genuinely interested in the people around him. The Second Chance Foundation began accepting applications, and the stories that came in were heartbreaking and inspiring. Single mothers working 3 jobs to support their kids. Single fathers who had given up on their dreams to provide for their families. People who just needed a little help, a little hope. And Julian and Callie made sure they got it. They read every application personally. And Julian often found himself moved to tears by the courage and determination of these people. One evening, about 6 months after the foundation launched, Callie came into Julian's office with a huge smile on her face. Guess what? She said. What? Julian asked, grinning at her enthusiasm. I just got my teaching credential. She said, I am officially a certified teacher. Julian jumped up from his desk and swept her into a hug. That is amazing, he said. I am so proud of you.